TV Store has a video called Mainstream Media History on YouTube. This is agreeing how it radicalizes people, which we know is true. Dore knows it's true. This is the guy that interviewed Caleb Kane, but that's why he mentioned Sam's name. Dore's in the same company as Crowder, Rubin, and other people that won't mention his name out. Dore just backed his idea about talking to Movement Boys. He just had his Dave Rubin moment saying how he just wants to talk about ideas. And it's not just Dore, there's many others that lie about why.
Did you bring up Movement Boys again? Since
Did you
say something recently?
Yeah, I just saw another video about it where he's talking about how we need to talk to all people instead of not just leftists, but progressives, people that are the socialists. We need to talk to everybody. And he also bragged about still going on to Tucker Carlson because Tucker Carlson anti-war is his line. It's ridiculous.
Here's the thing, and more people usually miscategorize my views on this as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with talking to anybody. There's nothing wrong with having on whoever you want on your show or going on whatever show you want to go on. Or just I have no problem with that at all. The point is, what is the purpose of it? If the purpose of having a right-winger on your show is to promote their views and let them talk it up as something great that is pushback, then that's wrong in my opinion. If your point is to promote those views. It's that simple. You can talk whatever you want, but what is the purpose of the conversation?
Exactly. Right. Katie Halpern and Taibbi were talking about having Rudy Giuliani on her show. And not to call out Rudy or the Trump administration out for their crimes and their incompetence, but to actually promote them. And it would be good for him to come on their show, So, why have Rudy on your show at all? If you're,
listen, if you want to have Giuliani on your show, and I'm sure it would be great for the show. Absolutely, I don't think there's anything really wrong with pointing that out. But again, what are they going to talk to him about? He's on there. Are they going to completely try to get something out of him, to try to hold him to account for the whole nonsense he went through, to put the election under scrutiny, unwarranted scrutiny? Are they going to nail him for his unabashed support of Trump's big lie, or are they going to have him on and talk on whatever? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. I don't know if it's happened yet. The first time I'm hearing of this particular thing. But again, my point is, have on whoever you want. But what is the purpose of the conversation? That's the real point to me. And to your main point, the nuance, I absolutely agree. In fact, last night, one of my tweets made it to Tucker Carlson show. I've not seen it. People send me a screenshot. And and what I gotta say, either Tucker's audience really does not care about the New York City mayoral race, or Tucker's audience is a lot less engaged, because I really didn't get much response from his viewership for this. But basically, when I saw it,
it's not especially quick. It's not. No, I was just going to say, it's just not like people and gas. It's news reports and talking points, people not talking the full story about Biden's immigration. We know it's not great, but we know it's far better than Trump by far. When it comes to Fauci and his emails, a lot of people on both sides, and I'm supposed to call on the left because that's what I'm a part of, not telling the full story about the emails, taking things out of context, misrepresenting what people say was meant at the time. You know what I mean? And now you have Dore's yes men, just like Dore's yes men, Ron Pacone attacking Tom Hartman of all people on Twitter. But
I can take right now as someone who looks at these Fauci emails, the vast majority of them, and has written about them. The interesting thing in there is getting a behind-the-scenes look at what the head of the response to the COVID pandemic was dealing with and going through. And I don't mean this, as sympathetically, but you can see what he went through, the mistakes he made, which there are mistakes he made, and getting information out of the right. And what's the record how responsive he was to anyone and everyone who replied to him, who sent him an email. But, and in terms of there being some sort of big unveil in there, like some big eureka moment in there, there is nothing of the sort. In fact, all the emails that are passed around as some big bombshells by the right especially, and by those on certain factions on the left, all those emails that are considered bombshells are emails that were sent to Fonji from complete nobody. One of the major emails that were being sent around was an email claiming that they had the recipe to make COVID-19. And what it was some COVID conspiracy theorist who runs a COVID conspiracy website where he sells COVID merch called COVID Candy. And the guy basically copied and pasted in all the scientific report from, I believe it was either like the late 1990s or early 2000s, that had absolutely nothing to do with COVID-19. I mean, it was just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There's nothing that people are turning nothing into something just because they hear that emails were released. Like, that's the thing. People don't understand what they're talking about. They assume emails released must have been some crazy information in there, must have been some sort of hack, which also is not true. They were released through a Freedom of Information Act request. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I mean, they after the Freedom of Information Act, they gave out those emails that, Biden or Fauci or anybody they wanted those still classified, they would be. Okay? And I'm thinking with the Wuhan virus leak theory that's out there, there's really still no evidence that it did. I mean, it's possible. But, again, not to tell both sides of the story just annoys me so much, especially when you're supposed to be elected progressive commentator on the story,
Thank you for the call.
Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I appreciate it.
And we could be together, baby. On the skies,
they released an unofficial tally of the ranked choice voting results for New York City mayor, and what happened was the original unofficial tally, again, unofficial, not the finalized results. There's still even 120-something thousand absentee ballots yet to be counted, but in the original unofficial tally, they accidentally added 130,000 some odd test ballots. Complete mess up, absolutely run the New York City Board of Elections over the coals for this. They deserve scrutiny, obviously, but mistakes do happen. And people, when they heard this, they didn't realize that was what happened. All they saw was, I included it, all they saw was a number of pundits, left, right, and center, also saw this and said the same thing. When Eric Adams had his original response, he was to that, it seemed like he was calling into question the entire election to some people at first, because he had already hinted he was going to do that before election day. He had already hinted that ranked choice voting was going to possibly cost him the election, and his campaign was calling the actual legal process in New York City, how voting actually works now in New York City, ranked choice voting. They were calling it racist because it was going to undermine his voters' will, which is not the case. Ranked choice voting makes it so no one's vote ever gets thrown away, depending on who they vote for. You can vote for whoever you want and still rank other people who could have a better shot. And your first choice doesn't make it, your real choice doesn't make it because they never really had a shot to begin with. Maybe your next choice gets your vote too, and then it keeps going down the line until you've exercised all your vote choice options. To me, it's the best possible way to make sure every single. Oh, excuse me, sorry, just finishing my lunch. I ordered the Crowder. It was really good. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and to hit the like button. Thank you. Can't do it without you.
Oh, but the brothers.
Here's Jen Psaki explaining why the U.S. carried out airstrikes in Syria and Iraq. It is because, of course, everyone knows this, they are so effective.
As a matter of domestic law, the president took this action, the airstrikes that were announced yesterday by the Department of Defense, pursuant to Article 2 authority to defend U.S. personnel. The targeted strikes were directed at facilities used by Iran-backed militias involved in these ongoing attacks for purposes including weapons storage, command, logistics, and unmanned aerial vehicle operations. So, Article 2, the self-defense, the defense of the United States and our interests is our domestic justification of these strikes. And that's yesterday. The president's view is that it was necessary, appropriate, deliberate action. These strikes are designed to limit the risk of escalation. We will take, and he believes we should and will take necessary and appropriate measures to defend U.S. personnel, partners, and allies in the region. Certainly, I would say, just kind of in relation to this question over here, we continue to believe that and have never held back from noting that Iran is a bad actor in the region. And they have taken part in and supported and participated in problematic, extremely problematic behavior in our view. At the same time, we feel that we're moving forward and seeking the opportunity to move forward on negotiations to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon is in our national interest, and that's how we will evaluate it. But it was not linked to a visit by the president of Israel, nor was it linked to any elections in Iran either.
First off, none of this is legal. There is, yes, domestic justification, but international law, we are sort of bypassed the development now. And the idea that Congress is authorized is absurd. The idea that we put our forces in, front of a bus and then say, well, the bus was coming right for us. We have the right to go in and it's also absurd. What's also absurd is this is just all about, it seems to me, some type of kabuki with trying to reinstate this the Iran deal, perhaps the single most unambiguous, I think, at least foreign policy success by the Obama administration, reversed by the Trump administration. Very difficult, obviously, to get back in. This is the big, example, because there's domestic politics in Iran as well. And the United States has to placate those neocons who are still jonesing for a war with Iran. And so this is the sad state of affairs here. But does it even feel like anybody in the country cares? That's why the Iranian we should be making the first step towards getting back into that. Without a doubt. I honestly think the political, in terms of the voting population, would appreciate that vote. But I'm just curious who is still super more of what you just saw, where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you.
Já percebemos. Não funciona.
I cannot recommend listening to this enough. It has to do a little bit with Reconstruction, but also 4th of July. Well, 5th of July. It's 5th of July appropriate. It's also 5th of July appropriate. Frederick Douglass. It is, you're going to want to listen to this. So check it out on Monday or watch it. I don't know why I always say listen. You can watch it too. It's pretty dynamic. I think I probably raised my eyebrows and curled my lips a couple of times during the course of it. So check that out. Thanks for joining us today. We will be talking to Ari Berman next week on Wednesday about what the Supreme Court has done. But between the cases that we talked about with Mark Stern yesterday and these two cases that came down basically as we were speaking with him yesterday, one dealing with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and the concept of racial disparity, the other dealing with a California law that required disclosure of dark money, or not dark money because it was disclosed. This 1-2 punch by the Supreme Court is both stunning and somewhat predictable with the 6-3 court. We are just at the beginning. It's impossible for me to say this dramatically enough. We are just at the beginning of the unwinding of so much that has been built, insufficient as it is, on the unwinding of elements that enhanced our democracy. I am certainly open to the critique of, to what extent we have a democracy when our politicians are far more responsive to to money than anything else. But if that is your concern, things got a lot worse yesterday. A lot worse. And they indicate that they're going to get a lot worse in the future. 6-3 Supreme Court is not only dramatically different than a 4-4 or a 4-5 or even a 5-4 conservative court. 6-3 means that the margin of error, that one where, Clarence Thomas took issue with this because he has these idiosyncrasies, that's over. That's over. This is, and if you watch this program in 2016, we said at the time the most lasting implications of a Donald Trump win were going to be the Supreme Court. And we have yet to even begin to understand that, I think. Voting rights, access to the courts, limits on corporate power, ability for government to regulate corporations, ability for government to perform some of the basic tasks that the vast majority of us assume that government is supposed to do. The idea that we could this Supreme Court, when Anthony Kennedy sat on it, the last one was Citizens United, but there was a series of cases, basically made it almost impossible to limit how much money can flow into our politics. Anthony Kennedy pretended that it was about, we still have disclosure. Well, yesterday, a huge stake was driven into the heart of that concept of disclosure. And again, we're at the beginning of this. At what point people have to understand the enormous power that rests with the Supreme Court. And you can deny, and I'd be the first one to say, it shouldn't be this way, but it is. And even if you are someone who believes that we need to get rid of the Supreme Court, we are that much further away from having the democracy to be able to even do that. There are 9 people, really 6 at this point, who wield more power than I think broadly we have any concept of. They do not have the constraints of politicians. They simply have no constraints except for ones that are in their minds about their notion within history, but the context in which they come from, the waters in which they swim, the narrowness of their constituencies, they are basically a constraint. Hugely important, hugely overlooked, particularly by the left in this country, sadly. With that said, let's take a look at, we still do have the ability, I think, to pass a big infrastructure bill. To the extent that there's any obstacles to that, they'd be Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. Here's Joe Manchin, and this is a guy walking a tightrope. He forged this gang of 10 bipartisan bill. The Republicans are scurrying around now to figure out, like, wait a second, how can we sink this even though we've signed up for it? So far, the only thing that they've landed on is we shouldn't be tied to the reconciliation bill. And Joe Biden realized that he may have made a mistake in being so public about it, so he backed off that. Here it is, Chris Cuomo trying to get Joe Manchin in a similar jam, but Joe Manchin finesses this quite well. This is going to sound mealy mouthed to you, but I perceive this as very helpful.
So now we're going to your side of the ball, Senator, on infrastructure. You guys put a deal together. The president likes the deal. Your party doesn't like the deal. They say we need the companion bill through reconciliation to get all the things that the bipartisan group of senators couldn't find. Is it, in your mind, something that must happen, the reconciliation bill?
Well, nothing must happen because this is a legislature. Things that we think would happen should happen. Sometimes doesn't happen. This is something I think that we need to absolutely vote on.
Well, people on the left flank on your party, Senator, say they won't give you your compromise bill on infrastructure if they don't get their bill on reconciliation.
So they see not one of that colleagues. The largest infrastructure provision of the roads, bridges, internet services, and rail service, and you name it, we get it. All that. If they would want to help for that, and let the perfectly things that they did, shame on us, man. What do they have in 2022?
Senator Joe Manchin, thank you, sir.
Aside from the incredibly abrupt ending there, I don't know what they edited out, but this is Joe Manchin basically saying, I'm going to vote for the reconciliation bill. Like, I'm going to make that happen. And I'm just going to pretend like this isn't a leverage situation. Because, gosh, I'd be surprised if they voted against the first one. I mean, so Manchin is signaling to the progressives, and frankly, it's not just the progressives in the House and in the Senate who want to pass the reconciliation bill. There seems to be broad support for the concept of it, and then maybe even the size. Maybe how it's distributed is not quite exactly settled. But there he is giving, in some ways, assuring, I'm going to vote for the reconciliation bill. I won't be a problem with that. But he also can't admit that it is tied to the fate of the bipartisan bill is tied to the reconciliation bill, because then that gives essentially a weapon to the Republicans, and they have then some type of, like, at least some public justification for sinking.
Basically, the moderate Republicans will take the opportunity to vote for
bunch of people walking around pretending like they don't know what's going on. And in fact, they do know what's going on. Mitch McConnell is desperate to try and figure out how he sinks this bill. And the Democrats so far have played this quite well. Give me million amount Democrats every day who are passing $5, $6 trillion, $4 trillion worth of infrastructure. I'll take that. Particularly when that infrastructure includes like health care, elderly care, paid leave. We'll see what's in these bills, but so far, those are good numbers anyways. Meanwhile, lastly, let's just do this as well. We have one more clip of a former moderate, conservative Democrat. And this is just absolutely bizarre. And there just seems to be like this branding mechanism with moderate Democrats. Claire McCaskill, she failed in a re-election bid. For some reason, Democratic sources cite her knowledge on how to get elected in places where she didn't get elected, didn't get re-elected. And but this is just bizarre. I certainly believe there should be a commission on January 6th. I think it's helpful both politically and important in terms of the country. I think there's also reason to believe that there may have been Republican politicians involved in this. But I'll remind you, this is also a person who has been saying for years we've got to be bipartisan and believed all sorts of bipartisan nonsense, or at least pushed it, as both a senator and as a commentator. She has a very odd new tradition in her family in celebrating July 4th. Listen to how people reacted to this 4th of July weekend.
We're going to start a new family tradition in my family on the 4th of July, and every 4th of July going forward, we're going to watch that video that the New York Times put together of January 6th.
All right, Claire McCaskill, have a great 4th of July to you and your family. Joe, same to you.
I was going to say, what's his name, the commentator? Willie Geist. I don't play poker with that guy. Don't play poker with that guy. He took a moment to sort of like, wait, I'm sorry, did you just say that what? They're going to replay that video of the New York Times of January 6th?
I mean, that's an insane thing to do. We're doing that on January 6th. But
look, I understand the personal motivation that people in that Capitol must have to find out what went on. And I understand the idea that if you worked in that place at one point, that you would also feel some type of personal, sort of outrage. But that's one of the biggest problems with senators, is that their personal relationships with other senators trumps the idea that you're voting on legislation that's going to impact the lives of, at the very least, 300 million people. I mean, everybody has their own traditions, and I'm not going to begrudge anybody that, but that is odd. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Heather Parton. Folks, today's program, Emma's really going to be bummed that she's not here today. But I'll say it right now, just because she's not here. Summer's here. The living ain't easy if you got swamp ass. Right? How are you going to stay on top of your sweating bottom? Well, how do I do it? I never sweat. But I don't walk it home as fast as you do. No, never. Brand new Hello Tushy 3.0 modern bidet attachment. It is stylish. It is eco-friendly. It is super easy to install. These are the two things that people are always very surprised about. At least when I hear back from people. Both, confidants, whatever, people I know via the show and people I know off the show, outside of the show. Two things that always shock them about the Hello Tushy of the day. One is how relatively inexpensive it is, because they hear bidet, they think thousands of dollars. This is much, much less expensive. And two, how easy it is to install. It attaches to your existing toilet. All you gotta do, basically change out the toilet seat, and then you just attach it to the existing plumbing that is there. You don't need electricity. Cuts your toilet paper use by 80%. It's just a more efficient and really an appropriate way to clean yourself that way. And the thing cleans itself, too, with the Smart Spray automatic nozzle. It has a 60-day risk-free guarantee. It has a 12-month warranty. And if you already have the classic Hello Tushy, upgrade to the 3.0 right now. You will be happy you did. To feed swamp ass, go to hellotushy.com/majority. Get 10% off plus free shipping. This is a special offer for our listeners. At hellotushy.com/majority. 10% off. hellotushy.com/majority. Check it out. Also, today's episode sponsored by Magic Spoon. And every day, except for yesterday, I couldn't eat yesterday because of an endoscopy. Magic Spoon, huge part of my day. Frankly, I eat stuff throughout basically the day here, but on weekends I have for show. I had for breakfast. Magic Spoon has 0 grams of sugar. Has 13 to 14 grams of protein, depending on the flavor. Only 4 net grams of carb in each serving. Only 140 calories per serving. It is keto-friendly. It is gluten-free. It is grain-free. It is soy-free. It is low-carb. It is GMO-free. You can build your own box, because they ship in a box of 4. You have 4 of the available flavors. So you build your own custom box. You get a variety pack: cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, blueberry, and cinnamon. I don't know if they have. Sometimes they have special flavors that I signed up for the VIP thing on my phone. It's available to other people too. Anybody could once you become a customer. But I got the chocolate and peanut butter, and I devoured that box. I think there may be a little bit left, but I nailed that thing hard. It was delicious. I've mixed it before, but somehow when they mix it, it's better. Cinnamon is fantastic. They have special seasonal flavors. They're great. Sometimes I wonder if they keep advertising on the show just because I've been buying so much that they think that it's doing really well. I probably shouldn't have said that. Now they're going to go check their records. I do it through a sock puppet. MagicSpoon.com/majority report. Grab your delicious cereal and try it today. And be sure to use our promo code Majority Report at checkout and save $5 off your order. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, don't refund your money. No questions asked. Remember, it's MagicSpoon.com/Majority Report. Use the code Majority Report to save $5 off. Okay, want to welcome back to the show the proprietor of the blog Hullabaloo and the columnist at Salon.com, Heather Parton, otherwise known as Digby. Heather, thanks so much for joining us today. Oh, she's connecting to audio right now. Heather, can you hear me?
I can. Can you see me? Everything good?
Everything's great. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know we're dealing with limited time today.
Okay.
There is a lot of stuff going on. We're going to talk about what's going on with the Supreme Court next week. That is maybe not a shock, except for when it arrives, it becomes just stunning. John Roberts has been wanting to get rid of the Voting Rights Act since his days as a lawyer for the Reagan administration, and the sort of fig leaf of disclosure of campaign finance rules, also sort of hacked away at the knees by Sam Alito out of California. We could talk about the Trump Weisselberg indictment, but I think we're going to have time to talk about that in the future. We've spoken about this on the exclusive Peacock show that we do, that we interviewed you for. But I think it bears repeating. Donald Rumsfeld died this week, and you and I both sort of started our professional careers in talking about politics. You writing about politics in the wake of in my mind, really three things: the 2020 election the 2000 election of George Bush, or selection as we refer to it today, 9/11 and our response to it, and particularly the illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq, which lasted almost a decade. Maybe arguably ongoing, and cost hundreds of thousands of lives, trillions of dollars. And Donald Rumsfeld was as responsible for that third thing as just about anybody alive, it seems to me. And one thing that you and I both talked about was how important it is to contextualize this man without him being allowed to sort of drift off into the night like he literally did, without putting a flag down and a marker and saying, this guy was responsible for heinous atrocities.
No, absolutely. I mean, he was one of the architects, maybe the main architect of the invasion of Iraq and the sort of pie in the sky ideas about what that was the changes that was going to bring. I mean, remember, on 9/11, on that day, I noticed all the pundits and the various commentators on this, who were, Defense Department reporters, going on and on about how Rumsfeld on that day, he was very brave, he ran out of his office, and I don't know, he saved some people, and he definitely wrote or whatever. I think people forget, though, that within minutes of that happening, his aides were taking notes about how he wanted to find a way to tie in that attack with Saddam Hussein. I mean, it took him it was on the same day that he was putting that together, knowing very well that there was no connection between what had happened on 9/11 and Saddam Hussein. They knew it was Osama bin Laden. They knew what was going on. Remember, I mean, we know people have been running around with their hair on fire, right? And that has been well documented in 9/11 before. So we knew he knew, and yet from the very beginning, he set out to put America on this path to, in his mind and the minds of others, became most important, to remake the Middle East. He was the guy who said, don't bother to go to the UN. I mean, he was pushing that from the very beginning. We need to go it alone. We need to establish our dominance. He was the one who thought that invading Afghanistan would be a snap and that the Taliban would be forever vanquished. I mean, how's that working out right now? I mean, good luck with that. So, I mean, this guy was, and you mentioned torture, of course, and we talked about that. He was one of them, pushing it hard, and in fact, he believed that the information gleaned from torture was much more reliable than information gleaned by the other means. That's the mindset that we're talking about. And, he goes way, way back to the long history of American politics, going all the way down to the 1960s. He was sort of a Nixon Republican when he was a member of Congress, and he joined the Nixon administration and was part of the Ford administration, and they were lying all that time as well. He and Dick Cheney were lying about the Soviet, menace and the Soviet, military might in order to, push this idea of American imperialism. He is that guy, and when he got that job as the Secretary of Defense in the Bush administration, I don't think that he anticipated he was going to have the chance that he got. He took full advantage of it to push these ideas that he and Dick Cheney and others like him have been pushing for decades. And it is a low point. As we discussed yesterday, this particular adventure of theirs is what set the table for what we went through with Donald Trump. I mean, people don't see the connection there, and it's a big, big mistake. The lies, talk about Trump being a liar and cheat, he lies about everything, lies, all that. Well, I mean, he was just more, crude about it. He was more clumsy about it. The Bush administration, they were professional liars, and they did it in ways that were absolutely devastating to millions of people. And no better than Donald Trump, downplaying the pandemic. And they did the same concept. These people have no conscience, and they result in mass death. And that's what we're looking at today, and that's what we were looking at then. It was Iraqis and Afghans. Today it is Americans. Okay, how'd that happen, right?
Yeah, I can't agree with you more on that construct. And I just to remind people, we know from Richard Clark, who was the chief counterterrorism advisor of the United States president at the time of the 9/11 attack. And in his book, he recounts that Donald Rumsfeld said shortly after that day, maybe it was the next day, maybe that day, that he wanted to bomb Iraq, even though there was no evidence of their involvement, simply because there was, quote, more good targets in Iraq than there was Afghanistan. And I agree with you. I don't think on the day that he got picked as Secretary of Defense that he could have imagined having a better opportunity. But I do think that he would have looked for any opportunity in which they could have done this. And there was for him, part of it was, I think that he was also part of the broad thinking that came from that Project for a New American Century. I don't know if he signed that actual document, but certainly Dick Cheney was in on it. Rumsfeld was on board. This notion of the U.S. being a hyperpower and their term, not mine, a hyperpower that was managing low-level conflicts around the world. And he wanted the opportunity to reshape the U.S. military. In fact, we did get out of the Iraq and Afghanistan, these 20-year wars, an expansion of what can be sort of conveniently called JSOC, which is the Joint Special Operations Command. And there is essentially a mini sort of hyper-uber army that we have that can be deployed covertly throughout the world, and it is. As we speak, when we talk about 900 personnel in Syria, we talk about people staying behind in Afghanistan, or we talk about operations that are happening in Somalia, or in the nether regions of Pakistan, or in Iraq, or wherever around the world, and probably some places in Latin America. We're talking about JSOC. This was Donald Rumsfeld's vision of a covert, mini military within the military that could go and do things without paying the costs, without being constrained by U.S. public opinion and awareness. And this is also the guy who said, literally, take the gloves off, unshackle those people who are dealing with our prisoners. Because, like what you said, he was promoting torture and knew that's all he had to do to promote that torture. And I just want to remind people, regardless of whose numbers you can use the Defense Department numbers, you can use numbers that come out of Brown, you can use numbers that have come out of various UN. I mean, there's been multiple different organizations over the years that have assessed what we did to Iraq and to the Iraqi people. And if you start with the Defense Department, you're talking about killing well over 100,000, maybe 150,000 civilians. If you go to anybody else's numbers that people think are probably more reasonable, you're talking about killing hundreds of thousands, up to 1 million. Again, I don't know if there is a moral difference between killing 100,000 people 200,000 or 500,000, but the amount of human suffering that we caused, and that he was as responsible as any single individual could be, is just mind-blowing. And never mind the millions of refugees and the destabilization that's happened there, and anything that could subsequently come from that. We've seen it over time. And, everything you just said about sending this country, he was part of a presidency that's really careened this country in many respects. I don't think we're done with that journey. And I just want to remind people, people talk about the authoritarian nature of the Trump regime, essentially, and John Dean wrote a book in 2006 called The Conscience of a Conservative, and he wrote that in conjunction with a guy named Bob Altemeyer, who was an expert on right-wing authoritarianism. And John Dean was talking about the authoritarianism that came out of the Bush administration. Everything that we see today in the Republican Party, everything. The politicization of the Department of Justice, the politicization of every aspect of the functioning of government, the attack on the administrative state, the authoritarian streak in the Republican Party, the training that we have as a public about why this all emanated out of that Bush administration. George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, hard to pick three other people in our modern history who are more responsible for what we have gone through and what I would imagine we would go through and just human suffering than those three. I mean, Henry Kissinger, definitely up there. I would say maybe beyond honorable mention, but in terms of the way that we now, these people should not be allowed to pass without this being marked. And the fact that Donald Rumsfeld never suffered any accountability for it, maybe he couldn't travel in Europe in the same way that he wanted to, or maybe, some places there were some concerns, I think, at different times that they might he might be held liable for some human rights violations. But aside from that, it really is, frankly, a shame. Maybe he was a nice husband, maybe he was a nice father. I don't know. I never knew him that way. I knew him just a guy who described this incredible horror to humanity.
Well, absolutely. And think about the corollary with him. I think that people think about is Robert McNamara, right, the Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam era, who also lied and basically allowed he knew that the United States was losing the war and that people were dying needlessly, and the whole thing was a quagmire and a mess, and yet he kept quiet about it. The difference between McNamara and Rumsfeld, and I'm not giving McNamara credit here, to say that he expressed regret. He actually felt bad in his life, and in his later years, that he went back in, he expressed, tremendous regret for having been part of that, and he took responsibility for it. Rumsfeld never, for a minute, had a second thought, as far as we know, and I don't think he did. I mean, none of the things, even people who are, were friendly toward him, or in the last few days talking about his legacy and such as it is, have suggested that he ever had a moment of regret. That guy just doesn't have regret, and didn't have regret. He thought everything was just fine. I mean, that really tells you something about the character of this person. I mean, that the sureness with which he, did all of these things was just, it was an amazing thing to see. And I do want to mention, at least, say something about this. The media has to take a big, dollop of the responsibility for what happened there. They worshipped Donald Rumsfeld at the time. I'm sure you remember, everybody listening remembers this, the press conferences that Rumsfeld would hold. I mean, they were like, comedy stand-up routines, and the press would laugh and wrote these amazing feature stories about him, and you had these conservative women who were calling him Rumsfeld, and saying that he was the hottest guy around, and comparing him to Bill Clinton. And, it was just sickening. It was an absolutely sickening display. And it wasn't just about Rumsfeld. Of course, the press was on board from Munich 9/11 happened, whatever the Bush administration wanted to do. And they bear responsibility for what happened there because they did not question it. They didn't feature any of the people who were questioning it, and there were millions of us in the United States and all over the world, including most of American allies, which Rumsfeld and Cheney said to take a hike. They never liked allies anyway. I mean, you talk about parallels between George Bush and his administration and Donald Trump. There's one for you. Allies. You need them, right?
I know you remember this, but people should understand. A lot of our audience is young, and they don't remember this. But you see, like the press talk about how Donald Trump he goes to France and he's rude to shaking Macron's hand too hard or whatever. We had Republicans who literally forced the cafeteria in Congress to change the name of French fries to Freedom Fries, so that because we were getting pushback about attacking Iraq. I mean, I remember Thomas Friedman writing a piece at that time about comparing a trip that he made to France, where on the menu there was some like asterisk next to the beef, saying that it was not factory farm or from the United States or something to that effect. I can't remember the specifics of it, but it just occurs to me. And he was comparing their arrogance about what meat they would eat to the fact that they won't join us.
I remember that.
Bombing and attack on Iraq, and it was this, Rumsfeld and Bush had to have this coalition of the willing, and just the whole era has gotten whitewashed by Trump, and frankly by a press that I think does not want to account for its responsibility during that era, frankly, and frankly, I also don't think that they've learned much of the lesson. I remember that the day that Donald Trump launched the attacks on Syria, sitting on MSNBC watching, all of the usual suspects. I happened to be on air at the moment that the announcement was there in terms of the bombing, and everybody on there, short of myself, and I think the host Chris Hayes at the time was like, "We should do this. We'll come up with a plan after we bomb." And certainly that was, you heard no response to Joe Biden launching similar attacks just 5 days ago. And
discussion of it. I don't even think, does anybody even know it happened? I mean, it's like it didn't happen. I was shocked by that.
And we, I think, as a country, are somewhat, I guess, we have the ability to deny these things or just ignore them because we had a 20-year-long war in Afghanistan. We had a nearly 20-year-long war in Iraq, and we just walked around every day as our tax dollars were killing tens of thousands of people, ultimately hundreds of thousands, and there was nothing, we didn't pay attention. We weren't allowed to see any of the buddies coming back from Iraq. It was just, it taught the American public to just enjoy, their lives as this one sort of narrow apparatus is going and involved in creating mass death and destruction. So,
and keep in mind too, just as the final thing, remember how much money is being spent on the military, and that goes from Bush to Trump. And they always like spending money in the military, but the spending now is overwhelming. While everybody's talking about debt, whatever, trying to get back, we can't really afford this or that. Well, take a look over there because it is so bloated now that I can't even imagine what are they spending on other than military contractors, which I guess is what it's really all about.
Yep, and yes, reinvigorating our nukes. Heather, thanks so much for joining us. I know it was a tight squeeze. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Deb. Have a great weekend.
Sure. Okay, we're not going to take a break. Let's just bring our next guest on. He is the executive director of the Writers Guild of America. Lowell Peterson. A couple of disclosures, just in the spirit of full disclosure. We should say, that I was a member of the Writers Guild. Cannot remember, in all honesty, if I was the East or the West, but nevertheless, in a different life, I would write half-hour sitcom strips, and it's been probably over a decade at this point, and my membership lapsed, but I should say I invested in terms of a pension. Knock on wood, that day will come eventually. And we should also say that this show runs on the Peacock app on the Choice Channel, which is one of two newsrooms that are being unionized by my understanding is a majority of the workers there. We're going to ask Lola about this. And Lola and I, we spoke on the Peacock, exclusive Peacock show, but I got a lot of pushback from audience members who wanted to hear some of it now. And so it worked out today because we needed a little time. And so, Lola, welcome to the program. Let me just put this in the context of, we have seen over the past 2 or 3 years, it seems to me, an enormous amount of organizing amongst journalists and news people in a way that seems unprecedented. Is my sense of that correct? And again, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Sam. It's great to talk to you again. Yeah, we have seen an enormous uptick in interest of journalists organizing. The MSNBC newsroom, by the way, it's 2/3 of the people in the newsroom signed a public petition saying, yes, we want to be represented by the Writers Guild of America East. It wasn't secret. They didn't do it anonymously. They put their names on the dotted line. We've organized a lot of digital native newsrooms in recent years. As you know, HuffPost, Vox, Vice, etc. are all represented by the Writers Guild of America East. We recently negotiated a contract at CBSN, which is the 24/7 live streaming service of CBS Network News, and we also brought in their Chicago network affiliate or local affiliate. So there's been a lot, and we're not the only union organizing, but we've added thousands of journalists to our ranks in the past 5 years, and we will bring in another 1,000 in the next year with MSNBC and Hearst and Bustle, and there's definitely an uptick to your point. There's definitely an explosion of interest amongst professional journalists, and hey, I want to be represented by a union. I want to negotiate the terms of my employment. How do I do it?
And what accounts for that? I mean, is that because there's a contraction that's happening, or is it because that there's an expansion and there's a flattening of compensation for people? I mean, what accounts for that as opposed to, like, I don't know, the way it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
I think it's two things. I think there is definitely a sense of insecurity. There are definitely journalists who say, well, I'm looking at a lot of consolidation. The companies are coming together. There's layoffs. The pandemic didn't exactly bolster people's confidence in their ability to stay employed. Advertising revenues are not so great sometimes. So I think there's definitely a sense of defensiveness. I think there's also a sense that particularly true in digital, but I say it's true in cable news as well. This is actually a place where I'm going to spend my career. This isn't just a way station on the way to a real job. This is the real job. And so what can I do to make the real job a real career? And I think what people are concluding is collective bargaining is the way to do it. I think it's also they've seen that we're successful. You know, it's not just an abstract idea. Hey, I want to be a union member because it sounds cool. It's because they look at their colleagues at other shops that have organized and they say, well, actually the union Writers Guild of America East negotiated a really good contract. They locked in benefits. They got me a greater voice on the job. They made gains in equity and inclusion. So, you know, it sort of spirals as people see that it actually can make a difference. It's not just an ethereal notion.
Yeah, I wondered about that because we see, you know, you see things like that amid now we're talking because trying to convince my kid to go to overnight camp, and you get these situations, but it happens with all the different types of things where, like, there are neighborhoods or towns where there's a lot of people who just happen to go to this camp that is randomly, and it's a function of
kids going one year, coming back next year and saying, this was great, and they come back. It sort of feels like the momentum, and I think they're trying to do this, actually, I think the AFL-CIO is trying to do this with Amazon shops. Once you get one or two shops that unionize, those people start to become evangelists, and you start to get more. Is that basically the dynamic?
Absolutely. They talk to their friends. So if I'm, say, a writer producer at MSNBC, I know somebody at CBSN or Fox Media or Fox Entertainment. I say, well, what's it like? Or often what happens is people go to work at a currently non-union place and they say, you know what, at my old shop, just negotiated a great contract. So there's definitely a community building aspect to this. And of course, we mercilessly take advantage of it because we want to make sure that our organizers keep track of people as they move around and make sure that, you know, people communicating with other people and making a decision to take action is fundamentally what this is about. Like, to my point about it not being an abstraction, it's very real. It's very much like you and me having the conversations and me saying to you, here's what it looks like, and then you having the conversation with a colleague. And that's how you build a strong labor movement. It's a movement of actual individual employees that is fostered, you know, by professional organizers. But if there isn't support at the grassroots level, at the level of one-on-one conversations between employees, it won't succeed. But it's happening. People are talking to each other, and they're saying, yeah, let's do this.
Okay, so walk me through this. There were 2/3. You have a bargaining unit, and that's determined. If correct me where I'm wrong here, because I'm trying to sort of like understand this for quite some time. The unit sort of self-defines on some level, right? Everybody who is this type of producer or does this type of work or doesn't manage people, but you know, and those are the parameters. They self-define, and they come to the union. They say, we want to unionize. We have 10%, 15%, 20%, and we need to start to organize. And then they start, they get some advice. We'll talk to some more of your colleagues and this and that. And so the workers at MSNBC and Choice, and we should say one license. So we're not, no one gets paid by NBC here or any of those entities. We license our show there. But so I don't really have much contact with these folks. Sometimes I've gone on as a guest, and I may have, know some of them. But so they organize, they come out, and they sign this pledge essentially, and they do it publicly, and they say, okay, 2/3 of us want to do this. What happens? A, what happens then, and B, is it typical that they're going to sign their name publicly? Because that to me seems like that took some guts a little bit, right? There's some risk associated with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not typical. Usually the card signing process is anonymous or confidential. We get people to sign cards, and then we say, we're going to keep it confidential. If the employer says, we'll recognize this union, we'll agree to sit down at the bargaining table, you have to prove they have a majority, then we'll get somebody, a preacher, an arbitrator, to take a look at the card and say, yeah, that's the majority. In this case, people went a step further, which is courageous and shows their commitment. And they signed it. They signed a petition that says, we authorize the writers of Americans to represent us. And then we went public with it. That was a bold move. I think it shows the level of solidarity that they have. I think that will help us ensure that we get recognized. And it also helps us when we actually sit down at the bargaining table for the company to know that many people are willing to take that level of risk. So if the company starts stonewalling us at the bargaining table and saying, no, we can't agree to that, and say, these people really mean it. They're not hiding behind the union. They put their names on the line. You have to agree to a reasonable collective bargaining.
So where is the status now? So they've come out and announced this. What are the key things that can happen once they announce this type of thing, and what can happen?
Well, so the preferred method has to be 95% of our organizers. We've done a lot of them. Many dozens of organizers are the investigators. Usually, the employer will volunteer. They'll say, we believe you. And sometimes they ask.
Oi, Robinho. Boa. Ficou fixe, não tinha chuva. Sì, se no. Os brazucas comem crianças. Os comunistas comem criancinhas. São o anticristo. Muito bom. Filma, mete nas nets, vai viral. Calma, vem ter comigo, vai-se embora. Vem ter comigo, vai-se embora. Vem ter comigo, vai-se embora. Está querendo. Como é que estás? Uhum. Cancro. Não, não se para nada com essa merda. E tu deste o cartão para ela ir às consultas? Sim, dá mais, claro. Quanto mais tempo, mais é. Tu também.
E ela estava a dizer, mas ela tinha que fazer exercícios, porque ela estava a estar resolvida, e realmente quem fez merda não foi ela, porque estava a ficar fodida com a vida que não foi ela que fez. E ela está a dizer, pode ser que eu não consiga, eu juro que ia tentar. Até porque tem coisa muito boa, né?
A malta que merece que tem boca toda, né? Que espertam boca toda.
Nunca pensei que eu tivesse caído.
Pois, e estás onde agora no carro, não? Sim, não sabemos tanto. Estou aqui.
Não foi muito, porque eu tive que deixar a minha orientada, então fiz não, obviamente. Pai, fui bem agradecida, porque se calhar eu estava muito que ele não só não teria vindo, ou se viesse, sabendo que a culpa não era minha, mas eu estava a culpa a mim. Por eu ter dito que sim, ou por ter não sei o quê. E eu disse, olha, desculpa, não podia criar isto expectativas, isto é combinado connosco, por isso soubesse não tinha dito que sim. E ele disse, não é alguma culpa, não é culpa. Só que talvez não tive, não dá jeito, e conseguiu voltar a volta, coisa que ele nunca fez quando estava pronto. Era culpa do técnico que eu estava a fazer. Realmente, ou ele não aconteceu de forma geral, ou então realmente só para não ser a mim, porque eu já não sou namorada.
Pode ser as duas coisas. Pode ser as duas coisas. Uma coisa não exclui a outra. Provavelmente pode ser um mistura das duas coisas. E eu provavelmente numa relação se igual.
Estava chateado com a cena da organização,
E tens as. Mas ou seja, atrasaram-se de todo ou não? Não percebi. Uhum. Pá, é assim, as coisas funcionam um bocado assim. Eu já pintei no Avante e já pintei um mural para bloco. Mas o bloco foi. O bloco até foi na cidade do Estado, foi uma cena do. Eu, mas não. Foi uma cena do referendo do voto do segundo. Não, primeiro. O primeiro não estava pintado. Quando for a exposição, temos que chatear o Romão para ir lá ver a exposição. Depois começamos a falar de morais, se eles ganharem também. Ok, sim, isso. Convidamos toda a gente, que deve haver votação. Não, até, mas o convidado até pode dizer, olha, não é só e tal, mas se quiseres, pode não, e lá e tal, conforme. Sim. Mas se não funciona muito bem. Para fazer as pessoas irem lá. Quando alguém tem algum poder económico e tal, ou isso, ou com algum interesse, é o que se tem de fazer, porque assim podes dar atenção à pessoa. Posso dar um segundo?
É tipo, eu dizia paixão e toda a gente respondia paixão.
Não há apropriar-se.
Claro que não escolhi. Claro que não escolhi o diretor de Portugal português.
Vou só ver se acaba está quase terminado.
Sometimes they ask in order to sometimes you know we're including that majority of the song up. And then we saw the recognition and and we always get a contact. Sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes it takes a year and a half. But we know how to reply right when we get the contract. That's the preferred method. That's what we propose to MSNBC. They immediately started saying, "Oh no, that's not right." People have to hear the other side of the story, as if professional journalists have already engaged in critical thinking. You know, that's the definition of a journalist, right? They question everything, and believe me, they question we're typically reluctant to do. In this case, we decided to do it just a couple days ago because we knew that we had the votes. We knew that the anti-union campaign that the company is pushing to drawn out is not going to work. People have already thought about it. So we're going to do it. We hope to have an election very soon. And ORB then sends out ballots and people say yes union or no union. They have a choice. And they mail it back and all right, gets it.
I have to say, it's just occurred to me, and I apologize to the audience, but I'm going to give the opportunity. If the company wants to make the argument as to what the other side is, I mean, I didn't mean to laugh when you said that because it's ostensibly granted as a progressive or liberal, like pro-union entity, and I'm not sure I understand what the other argument is, but I mean, if you want to take a crack at it, what is the other side of the argument? When 2/3 of the people say, like, we want to unionize, the company comes back and says, but if you get a union, you're gonna, I was a member of the Writers Guild. There was union dues, but it was worth it. I worked in show business. I can tell you, like, if they could have gotten me for a nickel, they would have done it, and they would have figured out, and they would have, particularly when there's a lot of competition, they'll put people. So what? For the sake of fairness, but I also want to make it clear that I'm willing to have, consider this an open invitation, have somebody come on from the company and say, like, this is the problem with union. But what would be your perspective on what they would say?
Well, we actually do know what they would say because every utterance from management that questions unionization, we hear about it. And sometimes in real time, it's a very transparent newsroom. Their argument is, yeah, collective bargaining is good everywhere, except here. So the logic of it, I have to admit, escapes me. Everybody knew they had to pay union dues. Of course, you have to pay union dues. That's part of paying for the service of negotiations and enforcing contracts and protecting you from getting whittled down to getting paid only a nickel, right? Which, as you point out, is these are profit-making companies. It's not necessarily evil, snidely whiplash. It's how they make money. So our goal is to make sure that the value that our members bring is properly calculated and paid. So I think the basic argument is, gee, why can't we all be friends? Honestly, there's no reason we can't be friends in a union environment. We have lots of collective bargaining agreements with lots of employers, and it's not like we go in with pitchforks and torches every 2 days. We just negotiate hard. We enforce our contracts, but we understand the need to have a professional working relationship. We have contracts at NBC. We have collective bargaining agreements and members who work under them in the same building as MSNBC. And in fact, I'll let you know, no big surprise, our members at 30 Rock strongly support this union effort at MSNBC. So everybody who actually works under a guild contract says you should do this. So there is a logical argument that MSNBC could make, but I think they just want to keep us out of power and retain the power themselves, and they'll come up with something. You're right, it's weird to have a progressive network try to come up with some reason why unionizing everyone else is fine, but not my people. That doesn't make any sense. But I think that's what they'll probably say.
And to be fair, I should also say that it's not. I don't. I don't know how the management works in the context of MSNBC. There may be, shareholder pressure. So I don't know. But we should say that this is not like a standalone company. It's owned by other entities, Comcast and whatnot. And
Comcast, yeah.
Shareholders say, like, well, if you play this out, we'll have a better 2021, and then we'll make the deal in 2022 or something like that. Who knows how that works there? Well, I appreciate your coming on, and I guess we just keep an eye out and watch what the National Labor Relations Board does, right? This winds through. Is that how it works?
It wants to. I will tell you, there is extremely little chance that we won't wind up sitting at the bargaining table. When I spoke with the labor relations people there, I said, look, we're going to be sitting at the bargaining table. Why do you have to push back and fight here? So I am confident that in a matter of weeks, maybe a month, that will be the outcome. But, you never know. And we'll definitely keep you posted. I appreciate you paying attention to this. It's important.
All right, well, thank you, Mo. I appreciate it, too. Thanks for coming on.
All right, thanks, Sam.
We've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Wrap up things for the week, at least for our Peacock viewers. We'll be right back after this. All right, folks. This was the week that was. Want to wish you who are watching us on the Choice channel on the Peacock app, have a great 4th of July weekend. We will be back on the 6th live, and we will see you then. But make sure you tune in to the replay that we're going to do on Monday. You're going to enjoy that. All right. We have American East on. And I thought it would be only fair to bring up the other side of that debate. And then, of course, second record.
It's got the show on it in the background.
No, I don't. Why do people talk about me like I'm not a human being? Oh, I think he's got the show on. I don't think he can hear us anymore. His hearing aid is down. Unbelievable.
It's in the middle of your introduction.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll
Hold on for a second. Wait a second. I want to do the introduction properly, but are you in like some type of like an art studio? Or
let's just say that I had some 75 people from my house of garden channel come over.
It looks like you're in an art studio and you set up like different things for people to practice on their painting. No, I mean like they've got like it's like a still life with an apple there.
I can't win. I can't win.
Doesn't that look like that backdrop? It look like honestly it's been set up as if they're like teaching painting there?
Oh no, this is my office. I have a various different museums behind me.
Some type of contract where they tell you like you can rent it, but don't hang anything on the wall. Everything that you put up must be on a table with a sheet. Now, can I do your intro?
Yes, you can. When you're doing my intro, I'm going to clean up the populace building.
Well, no, wait a second. Honestly, you look at that. Doesn't it look like that is like a painter's like a there's a cost?
That or when someone puts up in a wig.
Andy, is that are we looking at like some? He's not even. He doesn't even put on his. You can't even hear him. Andy,
what do you say about me now? I talked to him.
I'm asking, is Brendan just raised the possibility that maybe there's a wake going on there, and those are like artifacts from whoever passed away's life. That
I can't believe that. Now, I told Brendan not to bring that up. That's the train that my father was buried on. And that those are flowers from my father's funeral. It's wrong. Oh, my father died, now I'm the bad guy. I can't joke about it. My mother died, my father died, my sister died. I only have my brother left. Yet I can't make horrible comments, cheap comments about it.
Andy, can I please do your introduction? Okay, so we just heard from the Writers Guild of America, the executive director, Roll Peterson. And I thought it were only fair to bring on the opposing view, which is the executive director of AndyKindler.com, Andy Kindler, who has basically been blacklisted by show business, unable to. And I thought we would hear a counterpoint. Yeah, you
know what's amazing? All these white people, all of these, I mean, some of them have no talent at all, and yet they've been canceled somehow. They're not getting work. So any white person is not getting work, they've been canceled. Isn't that obvious?
I mean, Alex Lucas is quite a bit. I mean,
no, canceled. Even if you see a white person and they're in a movie and they're following along with the lips of the person that they're acting with, right? They're still, if anything happens to them,
I think I've told this story before, and I'll tell it again. When I don't know if you ever saw that thing called Beat Cops that I did with.
I loved it. I mentioned it.
So I wrote and directed that. It was an independent. We actually did it twice. The first time I co-wrote and directed it. Co-wrote it with my friend Charlie Fisher, you may remember from those videos back in the day. And I hired Nick DiPaolo. This was in 1999, I think it was, or somewhere around there. I hired Nick DiPaolo to play like a tough cop to bully Benjamin and I. And I'm talking to Nick, and I didn't know him that well. I just, knew about him a little bit peripherally. And he said, yeah, no, I moved back from LA. And I'm like, oh, well, why is that? Now, I had done a bunch of sitcoms at this point. Like, I had quite a run. Like, I had done probably 7 or 8 in the course of 5 years. And so I run into a lot of different, character actors, right? And particularly at that time, they were so formulaic. These were all bad shows and stuff, I should say. And Nick says to me, he goes like, yeah, no, I can't stand it out there. You can't get a job. He's a white guy. And I was like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah, right.
I literally did 4 shows with a guy exactly like you.
Yeah, yes.
The Italian guy was just like, and I'm like, if you couldn't get a job, I got news for you, dude. It wasn't Hollywood. There was so many jobs for white comedians and male comedians at that time that it was like you couldn't you were working.
Even I was working. I mean, when you talk about a field that's open, and I looked at first of all, every time I've been on the set, they have to stop and not directly into the camera, And it's, so, and I work, but and many times they go, you are so terrible. You are a forced white. So we're going to see it.
Honestly, this was a time where there was the UPN, the WB, Fox, CBS, ABC, NBC, and they were all doing shows almost exclusively with comedians. There was no British actors who were coming in jobs like there are today. There was no, they didn't believe actors could compete. It was all, we're going to put as many stand-ups as we can into the half hour, and then we're just going to pump them out. And they were doing like 4 or 5 a night on all these networks. It was just like a complete seller as a comedian market. And saying that there was too many non-white shows in the 90s is just sort of
it's built in. You know how much racism was built into the business? I mean, the victims of it felt. For example, I used to do the speech in my show, and I'll talk about in the 90s. I go, every time there's a black show, show with black people on it that doesn't work, Hollywood goes, well, we tried with black people. We had them all in one show. But every time a white show fails, they'll go, we tried the white people again. How come no one? I mean, and just build in racism. That's just not even considered.
Yeah, I mean, I think I became very conscious of it because the first, and then really the second show that I had done was called The Show. It was on for 8 or 9 episodes. And I was a whitehead variety. I was a whitehead writer of an all-black variety show.
Right.
That was the premise of it. And
isn't that something that exists? Oh, right, well, we're going to say something. Is it that?
the story of the executive producer, John Bowman, had done the Martin Show.
And nobody's more perfect. And John Bowman.
And right. But the point being that I realized, like, after, it was only the second show I had ever done. I had auditioned for 2 shows. All American Girl, which I got, and then The Show, and that was it. So I had no idea what auditioning was like in LA. And it wasn't until, like, the subsequent years after that I was like, I never see those guys anymore.
Yeah.
Like I see the same person. Like I would walk down the street and I would see Greg Proops like 5 times a day. Like I never saw like any of the folks I worked with on that show ever again. Like it was a completely different, segregated world, particularly in the 90s in particular.
Oh, I think it was, I think it was probably.
I'm sure it was worse before that, and maybe the subsequent, but that was just like, when I was there.
Well, I was around during the 60s and 70s to some degree as a young child, and everybody was like that. Oh, okay, we've solved all these civil rights things. What's going on now? So,
you auditioned to the Dick Van Dyke Show.
I did, but here's the thing. I auditioned for Richie as a small child, and I hated that kid. Oh my God. I tried to sabotage his audition.
Too big. You were too big for that show.
Well, they said,
you need a little kid, Andy. Not a college. Not a kid in college.
No, I could have been 4 years old on that show.
When you auditioned for the Sergeant Bilko show.
Yes. Back then, you didn't have, when you auditioned, they only had one microphone back then. Everybody had to gather around.
That's like you were doing all those radio plays.
And we had one joke. We had one joke when I started. One joke, that's it. We shared one joke. I had to walk 20 miles to get to the premise of the joke, another 30 miles to get to the punchline. Back in my day.
Now, wait a second. Are you in an office? Is this office in your home, or are you in a different?
Hold on a second. I have a meeting coming up where I'll be doing someone in that chair. Are you in the chair?
Office off premise?
Oh, yes! I have an office. I mentioned that. Oh, I'm not at my home. I think I have my sunny side over. My wife never cooked me breakfast.
You used to think like, what would happen if your wife was actually going to bring you lunch? Or
oh, no, 1 second, Seth. No, that's fine. No. French press is fine. No. French press is fine, even though I don't like French press. But the idea is I would accept it.
Right, now that's very, very, very amenable. So
I think I'm going to keep her. My wife. I think I'll keep her. You don't even remember that was person.
No, I don't.
He goes, my wife. I think I'll keep her. That was the punchline.
Oh my God.
You look good. You look handsome. This is the way I thought I would look.
These are always the day I try and dress. I know I shaved. That's what it was. I shaved.
No, but I wanted to look like you when I first got out of the home. That's what I thought. Good looking Jew like you.
A lot of work done. But
I have a lot of work done too, but not on my app, ladies and gentlemen.
All right. Can we please get to what this is all about today? Because I saw a clip, Andy, from Ben Shapiro, and it blew me away.
Is that a double time? Did you guys send me that double time? Because it sounds like because it does sound fast, but you get a little drunk quickly.
So we have this clip, but we will play it double time, actually. That's why wouldn't we? But Ben Shapiro has found secret subliminal conservative messages in Hollywood popular movies that we, as shit-libs or leftists or sock Dems or on socialists or maybe even arguing with super radical leftists. We watch these movies and we don't realize. We don't know. We don't know that they're there. We don't know that they're there because we embrace them. We're secretly conservative. So let's watch this clip. And I thought, who better than the Don of Hollywood, the Don Kindler of Hollywood, Andy Kindler, to come and actually, decipher whether this is true or not. So here is Ben Shapiro explaining to all of us how we secretly love conservative narratives.
We're going to be talking about why so many of your favorite movies are secretly conservative. Just want to give a shout out to our friends over at Raycon for sponsoring this video. One of the best pair of wireless earbuds on the market. Raycons are the ones.
Hi, I'm John Krasinski, and I'm hosting SNL with Machine Gun Kelly. No pressure, though.
Who doesn't love John Krasinski? Makes sense. Lots of love about John Krasinski. Who loved The Office, Raymond's Gym, and of course, he made a delightful little Apple release show